So next, transition and changing gears a little bit. Really excited that we have the opportunity here to hear from Dr. Christine Mainquist-Whigham. So Dr. Mainquist-Whigham is a director of health for Pill & Family Farms and DNA Genetics, where she oversees the system health and biosecurity and is also involved in the business's research and development team. She grew up on a farm outside of Stanton, Iowa, fostering her passion for science and agriculture. She did her undergraduate training at Nebraska Wesleyan University and then did her DVM training and received a master's degree from Iowa State. We're really fortunate to have her as part of the program, and for the next half hour or so, she'll share some thoughts and perspective and what they've been working on in their business and their system, and then following that, we'll have some great opportunity for some discussion as a whole. So please join me in welcoming Dr. Christine to the podium.
Well, really honored to be here today and very excited to share what our system is doing. Really tough to follow all that great data that everybody shared this morning, and it was fun seeing the Prosper stuff. I think if we'd had that 10 years ago when we started our journey, it would have been a much shorter journey than 10 years with some of the stuff that we found. So yeah, we'll go through kind of who we are, Pill & Family Farms, our story, and hopefully be able to share some things that you guys can take home from our experiences, and would also welcome, any dialogue, follow-up questions after this too. So I'm the one who gets to present the information today, but a lot of this was developed through our whole team. So I think we've got, some of our nutritionists here that were big players in this, obviously our production teams. So this was not done in a vacuum. This was done as a whole team. So first I'll just give you a little bit of overview of who we are, Pill & Family Farms, just to give some background of what our system looks like and how these changes impacted us. We'll talk through how we approached livability and the improvement strategy. Specifically our livability targets that we looked at were early nursery, getting pigs started and preventing some of that early nursery scour. The second would be looking at some mid-nursery death loss. When we looked at where death loss was occurring, there were some spikes mid-nursery and how we tackled that. And then lastly, a lot of the death loss is coming from small pigs, poll pigs, and so some strategies that we've utilized to look at improving mortality there, or lack of improvement of mortality, but at least some improvement in feed intake and average daily gain. So to start, we're Pill & Family Farms, so roughly 75,000 commercial sows based mostly out of Nebraska. We do finish. All of our animals were pretty much exclusively nursery finish system with a few exceptions. We'd finish out about 2 million pigs per year. We have very large sites. I'm sure some of you have been to Nebraska, been to some of our sites, but our sow farms are pretty normal, ranging from like 2,500 to 10,000, but our nursery sites are huge. So, our smallest would be maybe 6,000, but an average would be around 12 to 14,000 nursery pigs. And then our finishing sites would be the same, anywhere from 12,000 to 30,000 finishing pigs. So to fill those sites quickly in an all-in-all-out fashion, we do a lot of commingling, presenting a lot of health challenges along the way. So this is not going to be a perfectly clean all-in, all-out system with the information that I'm sharing. So here'd be an example of what our typical nursery room would look like. If we could build an ideal room, it would be a hot nursery with plastic floors and really good access to water, really good access to feed, and perfect ventilation. So we did our best to do that, and I think we'd probably still change some things, but most of our nurseries and most of the data would be in a setup similar to this. So this nursery room would be approximately 1,400 pigs. So when we look at how we approached improvement and what we're looking at, we kind of two different ways we looked at this. So one would be observational data. We started this journey over 10 years ago, and if we didn't have, Steve outlining exactly what changes we made and tying that to closeouts, tying that to performance, I don't think we would have been able to fine-tune areas to look at. So we, keep a record huge. then carving out time to actually analyze that data. So it's great, you've got all this information, but unless you have somebody going back and keeping track and reviewing this, a lot of interventions get missed and some of those changes don't get accounted for. And then in bold, one change at a time, this can be really hard. When we're experiencing, 6, 7, 8% nursery mortality in PRRS negative pigs, like that's a disaster. And so you want to throw everything at it, but having some discipline to do one change at a time and really monitor those metrics, I think was valuable in fine-tuning impact. So once we had information, that observational data, some things to go target, then applying some research and science to help, verify that ROI, because sometimes you just can't get the reps quickly enough with field with just observational data. So we do a lot of applied research within our system, a lot of applied field research. We would also have, designated research barns to help look at things specifically like nursery strategies. So I'll share some of those today too. And then do want to mention the collaborations, being able to work through with a lot of, you guys in the room, universities, and collaborate on some of these ideas, I think helps get some of this across the finish line. So problem one, we'll jump into our early nursery. So this would be getting pigs started on feed and some of that early nursery scour. So what we were seeing, they're scouring right away. We've got a failure to thrive issue. We go in and we do multiple rounds of diagnostics, and it's like, okay, rotavirus, what are we going to do here? So obviously we, tried some medication, tried some nutritional intervention, and it would make a dent, but it wasn't like the silver bullet that we were hoping for. So at this point in this journey, we're probably around 5-6% nursery mortality and just cannot make any impact on this. So, our assumptions that the scour alone is probably around 1% mortality. That was kind of hard to quantify. So of all the things that I'm going to share today, I think this one has made the biggest impact to our system. And if you take anything home, sanitation, sanitation, sanitation. When we look at some of the interventions we've done, I don't know if you guys are familiar, we've got some concrete bunkers that were World War II ammunition bunkers down by Hastings, and we decided we wanted to raise pigs in those. So these are not designed for pigs, concrete floors, a mixture of designs, but very hard to clean. So we had done some formaldehyding of these just to kind of break that cycle, and it's amazing. You can go from this high pathogen burden, same flow of pigs, you go in formaldehyde and boom, cut your nursery mortality, by more than half. So I think that was kind of an indication that sanitation is maybe a piece of this. And the science makes sense too, right? So especially even on the plastic floors, we've got a huge buildup of organic material. We know that there's biofilms there harboring viruses, harboring bacteria, and coaching people on this. You can go in and you can feel how slimy those slats are, how slimy that plastic nursery flooring is, but it's a huge deal to pathogen control. And when we think about training, so here's an end of the nursery turn, and you look at these, these floors are white, were white, and so then you get to this point at the end of the nursery and you realize there must be a huge bug burden going on here. So we evaluated what we were doing and said, okay, we need to attack these biofilms. So we did add a detergent to our wash process. So this is kind of a before and after comparison, but we had 340 barns on trial. So we utilized an alkaline detergent, and I want to specify alkaline is very important for breaking up the biofilms. The acidic, detergents would be more for rust and scale, hard water buildup, but these alkaline detergents are going to get through your biofilms. So we did 164 barns with no detergent, 176 barns with detergent. We put it on pretty thick, so we probably didn't need to use 5 gallons per room. I think we're down to a gallon and a half per room. But we looked at specifically mortality, and we picked up a huge difference. So we dropped mortality by 1.15% just with the addition of a detergent. So after that, we revised our sanitation protocol, and I think really all of these are super key. But one, removing organic material. So if that's in the sow farm, you scrape crates. If that's in your nursery, soak that a little bit just to loosen that organic material up. But then go in and apply a detergent before power washing. So alkaline degreaser at a 1 to 64 application rate, and then ideally like a 20-minute contact or 30-minute contact time. If you tell them 30 minutes, it's probably 10. But this step was huge. So compliance. I don't know that we have many people applying at a 1 to 64 rate or applying it correctly. So there's constant training involved here to get this done right. Next would be power washing with hot water at 130 degrees. Every time I'm through a barn when we're power washing, you grab that power wash line, and if it's cold, you got a problem. And that's probably 50% of the time too. So compliance on hot water, keeping those power washers maintained is a big deal. Going in and inspecting after that step, and then standard disinfection, and then if you can get it, dry and down time. If not, hope for the best. So I think having this sanitation protocol in place is great, but there's got to be execution on the backside. So I'll share really quick one story along these lines. So we've got this sanitation protocol in place, and there's this contract nursery that consistently, PERS negative pigs, we're having E. coli break after E. coli break, around 8% mortality. So we say, all right, implement the sanitation protocol. They do, and there's no improvement. So we sent one of our veterinarians, Nathaniel, was like, all right, I'm going to take some time here. Well, okay, they're not actually doing the process that they said they were doing. They didn't apply detergent. They weren't using hot power wash. So he spent that entire week training, coaching. He did the process with them, implemented all of this with a few extra sanitation steps. And next turn, we closed out under 2% with no E. coli breaks. There were a few other things he did there too, but I think that sanitation step, compliance and training was a big deal. And we like to tell the story, all right, when you wash your dishes, are you going to rinse your dishes in cold water and then serve, your kids' food on those plates? Or are you going to wash them with soap and hot water and give them time to dry? So the second thing we looked at with the early nursery scour was environment. And I think this one's a little bit harder to measure, but I want to share the story because this was a big deal for us. So first thing we did was implementing some technology to observe behavior, what was going on in those early nurseries, and then made some barn modifications following that. So the technology investment was cameras. We did install cameras in every barn. So this allowed us to have some real-time observation of what was going on, and then additionally historic observation. It stores around 2 to 3 weeks of footage. And then we had our production teams, our ventilation experts all meet every Friday morning and review footage and talk about what we're seeing. I can share more on the materials, but we have an NVR in the office. We would have some PoE switches in the hallways to extend it all the way down to the furthest nursery to allow us to have all nursery rooms on there. And then the installation in the nursery, we did 1 camera per room, either down the center alley or a side of the room, just to make sure we could see those pigs. So some of the big observations that we saw, huge nurseries, so we're filling half a room a day. When we did that half of the room, we saw this. Tremendous amount of piling and chilling. And we realized we set these barns up. The min-vent setting was for a full room of 1,400 pigs, not a half-stocked room of 700 pigs. So we were able to do some min-vent setting adjustments on that first fill and inlet setting adjustments to help reduce draft and total CFM in the room. The additional thing we noticed that at this point we were vaccinating still in the nursery. And every time we went in and vaccinated, it looked like those pigs were pretty stressed. So we saw a really similar response to this, piling and chilling. And so I'll talk about it in the next section, but the action there was to review alternative vaccine timing strategies. So additionally, we've seen a lot of examples over the last couple days of gruel feeding pans. And we would have had a similar setup previously, so those long pans that allow a lot of pigs access. But what we saw is these pigs then were laying in the pans and they're getting wet. And it was just kind of a mess that we had going on, and we were getting wet floors. And then when we had team members doing the gruel, they were dumping out the gruel pans and making the environments even more wet. So we had a really high humidity environment. So that really changed how we viewed our grueling strategy and how we were coaching team members on how to gruel. We also noticed that barn style and ventilation settings made a huge difference on that airflow. So I'll just share a few examples on what we've done with inlets. There's not a whole lot you can do for ceiling obstructions other than changing which inlets you have open. Made some changes to our heater settings, changes to how we have some things on the doors, and then some issues with attic pressurization that we were all able to visualize through these cameras. A big piece of this too is really understanding your airflow out of the inlets so we can see what's going on the cameras, but then going in barn and testing this and making sure that we have that right velocity and not drafting pigs was a big piece. So most of these would be bifold inlets, and when they're just barely cracked open, you're not really allowing for much space for that air to come in, but there is a crack down the center. So we implemented bubble wrap on the underside of those inlets to prevent that air from dropping straight down out of the center, and honestly, it made a huge difference to that pig laying patterns, and we could dictate where the air went better. We also had some leaking around the edge of the inlet, so went in and caulked those, and then just sealed up that barn a little bit tighter. Additionally, we were able to see, we thought we designed these great, but how we put some of the feed lines in, the water lines in, electrical lines was actually blocking that airflow and then causing some turbulence, and that airflow was dropping on pigs. And so that's where deciding which inlets to have open and where was a big deal. The doors, we had these nice sliding doors, which were great for entry and pig movement, but they had huge gaps along the side, so you could see the front pens being chilled. Back pens were fine, but those front pens were chilled, so it was pretty simple. Just went in and did some weather stripping around there and made a huge difference. The last thing we noticed was that we ended up in more of a positive pressure barn situation on really windy days. Spring and fall in Nebraska, we get some 40, 50 mile an hour winds, and we get a lot of attic pressurization. So that high velocity air was forcing itself into the attic and forcing itself through the inlets. So what we did was we added some relief shutters in the attic, and it pretty much, eliminated a lot of that pressurization we were seeing. So the fans were controlling the airflow, not the wind. The last thing I've got on ventilation would just be on the people side and not overreacting to the environment when they're in there. So this is pulled from our barn report, but looking at the humidity following choring events. So here we'd have, their first time through the nursery around 6:30 in the morning. We were sitting at around 50% humidity, going in chore, and now we're up at 70, 75%. So a person who's in there, if you're going to be measuring humidity, we don't want them adjusting that ventilation based on what they're doing after they're choring, because that respiration rate of those pigs is what's causing that. So we saw the same thing. They came back in here again at 9:30, huge spike in humidity. So really wanting to avoid those major changes in ventilation just based on a choring event. So next I'll jump into our mid-nursery livability. So this is where we were able to observe those stress events, causing some piling, chilling, and then a lot of times that was followed with some acute death loss. And on our barns where we were able to collect feed intake data, we saw a massive drop in feed intake following those events. So we looked at some strategies to reduce the number of those stress events, and then I'll share a study that we did looking at setting the immune system up for success by reducing our pathogen load at the beginning of the nursery. So the first thing we did was looking at our vaccination timing. We were on a traditional vaccination program, weaning, and then again 3 weeks placed in the nursery. And these are big nursery sites where we're asking our team members to go in and vaccinate. I'm not saying that was done very well all the time. We go in, you crowd pigs, you're shooting pigs, they're very stressed. So some of that was on us for how we were doing it, but we got to adapt to what our system can do. So we looked at pushing everything into the sow farm for compliance and to reduce stress event. So here's our old protocol. We vaccinated day prior to weaning, vaccinated 3 weeks placed, and then we switched to an early protocol. So we instead vaccinated now at processing and the day prior to weaning, completely cutting out any type of nursery vaccination. So we did 187 barns with the late strategy, 141 barns with the early strategy, and looked at mortality, feed intake, feed conversion, and gain. And we were able to pick up a measurable mortality response just to this vaccine timing change. So there's mortality here. So it was about 0.75% drop in mortality. And a lot of that was, maybe an E. coli break or a parasuis break following those stress events. But this number was real, statistically significant. And we've been able to repeat this in some randomized controlled trials that we've done as well. Not quite to this magnitude, but it'd be close. And then, significant improvement in feed intake, feed conversion, and average daily gain with that change. So I'm not recommending you go switch to an early program. We did a lot of work to feel comfortable in our, maternal antibody status and compliance prior to doing this, but this is just something that worked for us. So same thing, we were also giving a PRRS vaccine on arrival into the nursery and wanted to understand what impact that was causing. So kind of a similar thing. I think this is not at all related to the PRRS vaccine. I'm not saying don't vaccinate your pigs for PRRS, but for us it was the stress response. And we did see about a 0.5% mortality improvement by not stressing those pigs out and giving PRRS vaccine early nursery. So last would be looking at some medication strategies to reduce bug load, especially in this commingled environment where it's nickel and diming us on that mid-nursery mortality. So here we administered Pulmotil to sows and farrowing. So half of our sows had Pulmotil. We kept track of those pigs. The other half of the sows did not have Pulmotil, kept track of those pigs, and then weaned those into a research facility. There was absolutely no treatment done to the pig. This was all done to the sow. And then, we looked at dead poll percentage, treats, and med costs on those pigs through the nursery phase. And we did see a significant improvement. So mortality alone, we saw over 1% mortality improvement in the nursery phase by treating sows in farrowing. We saw an improvement also in the poll percentage in addition to the dead percentage. But then here was a big thing for us when we looked at the number of treatments that were occurring per pen. We were able to actually reduce our antibiotic usage in the nursery and reduce our med cost per pig in the nursery by lowering that bug load prior to weaning. So last, I mentioned recovery rate, and a lot of this mortality is coming from small pigs, poll pigs, compromised pigs. It seems like those big gen pop pigs, they're going to get to the nursery fine even if we screw them up. So what strategies can we implement to elevate small pig performance, and what strategies can be implemented to improve recovery rate of poll pigs? So this is a trial we just kind of hot off the press, looking at nursery pig management and how we start pigs. So we wanted to look at the effect of nursery pig movement on nursery pig performance and health. And along with that, the effect of mixing nursery pigs once they're placed on their performance and health, and then hopefully develop some best practices surrounding nursery pig pen management. So I think these are all things that we know occur. But if you move pigs and how you place pigs, you can have different behavioral patterns, you can affect social hierarchies, you can impact access to feed and water, and then one of our hypotheses was that potentially there's some pathogen load differences whether or not we move pigs. We make rubble in farrowing, should we make rubble in the nursery? That was kind of what we're looking at here. Second would be we don't have an excess of labor. So are there things that we can do to cut down on what we're asking of people, to cut down on the complexity of the training to help improve labor and execution? So is that upfront pulling and sorting? Is that increasing their ability to walk pens, find animals that are sick and need attention more easily? And then is that going to increase or improve the rate of pulling and treating? And so that goes into that third point of training and consistency on how to manage pens can be really difficult. Obviously, stocking density is going to be a big deal, and if you overpull or underpull, you're going to impact the stocking density either in your gen pop or your sick pens, so we did want to look at this too. So ultimate goal, we want data-backed management practices that we can define to help support employees and to help improve health and performance. So this study we did at our nursery research test facility. We have 2 different nurseries there that we're able to do. So we did 2 separate trials in each of the nurseries. So we did a little over 4,700 pigs were on trial and assigned to one of 3 management treatments, which I'll cover on the next slide. We did control for how they were going to pull. So we had some mandatory pulls at like a day 3 to 5 and 8 to 10. All pigs needed to be pulled by 21 days. So we wanted to keep that consistency across rooms and treatments. And we collected individual weights at weaning, day 28, day 42. We tracked all movement events, all mortality events, and then we did do some environmental swabs to look for some pathogen load differences. I don't have all the stats done, so the one I'll talk about today are weight, ADG, and mortality, with a little bit more to come hopefully over the next few weeks. So treatment 1, this was kind of our McRebel treatment. So we wanted no pig movement. All pigs are going to be placed, and then once they're placed in the nursery, that's where they're going to stay. Treatment 2 would be more of a traditional how we would manage nurseries today. So leaving a pen open for 6 and pulls, you do an upfront sort into the other 5 pens, and then you allow for pulls up to 21 days. Once a pig's pulled, then it's going to stay in that pen. Treatment 3, it was set up the same as treatment 2 all the way up to day 28, but then after day 28, we moved pigs from the pull pen back into Gen Pop, because a lot of the feedback we get is, well, we're pulling, we don't have room in our pull pen anymore, what are we going to do? And then people are going and putting the recovered pigs back into Gen Pop. So how does that actually impact nursery performance? So here we've got our 2 different trials. So trial 1, this would be kind of our standard nursery barn. We will be able to get feed intake data off of this one as well. But you can see each of these is a room. Treatment 1, this is kind of how we set it up. We did do a small pull. So between 16% and 20% of the pigs were pulled up front, and all these groups are small pigs. And then in our other treatments where we allowed for a pull pen, we slightly overstocked at the beginning compared to treatment 1, but then we allowed for this pull pen to occur up to day 21. In trial 2, it was a big pens. So each room had 4 pens with a lot of pigs. So we only did the small sort in treatment 1, and then treatments 2 and 3, we left that pen for pulls. So it is a little bit different across the 2 nurseries. So we'll jump into results. Was it really exciting? We did find that there are some performance differences across these 3 management strategies. I think the take home here would be, looking at, here we would have just, exit weight or weights at each of these time points. This would be our average daily gain. But treatment 1 in both trial 1 and trial 2 outperformed treatment 3, which was that mixing. So pretty substantial difference in weight with both of these trials. Trial 2, we did not see any difference between treatment 1 and treatment 2 on exit weights. Average daily gain, those trends were the same. We actually saw an improvement, especially late. So we looked at gain wean to day 28, wean to day 42, and then day 28 to day 42, so that last half of the nursery. So treatment 1 outperformed treatments 2 and 3 in our first more traditional barn, and then we had treatments 1 and 2 both outperform treatment 3 in our less traditional barn in terms of average daily gain. So, I think these are probably expected. You kind of think the less you move pigs, the better, but it was really nice to be, validated with these results. So this is the livability conference. We care about livability, so we also looked at mortality. And this is one of the, the struggles with field data versus research data. So only having 24 rooms to evaluate. We were not able to pick up any differences in mortality. This was not a PERS positive flow, so there wasn't a ton of mortality. But we did not notice, there was really no pattern, no numeric, no statistical difference on mortality in the nursery across these 2 groups. Was able to get a little bit of the diagnostics put together for this. So we did look at rotavirus CT values across the 3 treatments at different time points. So this one, I just pulled our trial 1, day 42 rotavirus PCR So this would be the distribution of those CT values. And just to orient you, a lower CT value means more rotavirus present in that sample. So we collected 2 environmental swabs per room, and we had designated pens. One was a GenPop pen and one was the POL pen, and examined those CT values. So consistently across both trials, we did see a lower CT value, higher pathogen burden, specifically on rotavirus C in treatment 3 compared to our McRubble treatment 1. So we've got a little bit more to analyze on this, but I think the findings of the increased pathogen load support what we expected. So in summary, pulling pigs to a sick pen and resorting them back into general population, we saw reduced growth performance compared to the other 2 management strategies. Sorting pigs initially on arrival does appear to be a viable nursery management strategy to maximize performance, and probably that's going to be the best one to help reduce labor throughout the turn and increase compliance, especially on nursery teams that we have difficulty training. And then lastly, pig movement and mixing resulted in a higher rotavirus burden than treatments where fewer movements occurred. So we've seen, I'll kind of go through this one quickly since we've seen a lot of really good information on creep feeding also today, but this data would support creep feeding is very important to improving the performance of the small pigs in the population and the population in general. So I'll just kind of jump through what we did here. So this was done at a nursery research facility also. We did the creep feeding for 7 days prior to weaning, and then those pigs were, randomly allocated in the nursery mix. No treatment occurred after they were placed in the nursery. So we collected weights at different time points and mortality. So this is our all pig data, so not looking at the small pigs, this is just total populations, but significant improvement in wean weight on the creep-fed animals, improvement in 1 week post-weaning weight, improvement in nursery exit weights. So I think these findings support what we saw earlier today. Average daily gain trends, as you would expect, followed that as well. Average daily feed intake. We heard that feed intake early results in better livability. Well, we know that creep feeding does impact early feed intake. That 1 week post-placement average daily feed intake was improved by 0.06. Did not pick up any differences in mortality. Again, we ended this study, at the end of the nursery and then followed them through into finishing, but no mortality differences here. So when we look specifically at the hard starters, and we define a hard starter as a pig that lost weight in the first 7 days post-weaning, the trends are very similar but magnified. So wean weight, we still saw that the creep feeding improves wean weight. Our 1 week post-weaning weight, over a pound improvement on creep-fed animals versus not. That trend carried through the end of the nursery. We're 5 pounds heavier at the end of the nursery, and then we're 12 pounds heavier at the beginning of the marketing phase. So that growth that we saw on those hard starters carried all the way out through finishing. Average daily gain, I don't know, for the nutritionist, that's statistically significant, right? We count that 0.06. But we saw the average daily gain improvement trends there as well. And same thing, really no numerical difference in mortality, but we have a hard time picking that up. But we did see a 3% numeric difference, no statistical difference in nursery mortality for creep feeding versus non-creep feeding on those hard starters. So just in the interest of time, I'll hit on mat feeding because you guys brought that up too. Our results on mat feeding would say the same thing. This is extremely important. So we did a pilot trial looking at 200 animals mat fed 6 times a day or no mat feeding at all. Weighed at day 2 and 14, and at day 14 we're almost a pound heavier mat feeding versus not mat feeding. And then a little bit bigger field trial, we did see a livability response to mat feeding, a reduction of about 1% on livability. So I tried to summarize our livability improvements on the different things I talked about today This is just nursery livability. I do think if we'd follow some of these through into the finisher, we might capture some of that too. But in summary, sanitation, huge, very critical. We saw a 1.15 decrease in mortality or improvement in livability with that change. Camera technology, environmental changes. This one was harder to look at because we kind of saw a steady decline in mortality, but I'll give about a 0.5% credit to that. Reduction of stressful events, that vaccine specifically in the nursery. If you combine the two, that was about a 1.25% improvement in livability. If we looked at the antibiotic strategies to reduce pathogen load, that was an additional 1.15% improvement in livability. And then I gave no credit to any of these trials, but I think there probably should be some credit there if we had larger numbers on some of the livability improvements. So if you add all that up, I mean, we're at like 3.5%, 4%. Obviously, you're not going to see that big of a difference by implementing all of these, but I think the trends are there. So take home, doing these field-based evaluations within the system were key to identifying areas of opportunity for us. Making those investments in technology could lead to improvements in livability in your system as you see those changes. But ultimately, I think, multiple people have said it, but there's not like one thing that's going to improve livability. Doing many of these little things correctly can make these incremental improvements in livability. And so hopefully, something here was valuable to you guys today. Would definitely welcome any discussions, thoughts. We're always looking to improve, but really happy to be able to share this. So thank you.